U.S. President Joe Biden will deliver his second State of the Union address tonight. It'll be Biden's first speech to Congress, though, since Republicans took back control of the House in the midterms. For more on what we can expect, let's go live to CTV's Richard Madden. He's on Capitol Hill in Washington. Richard, we hear there won't be any policy proposals put forward. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, the State of the Union is really just pomp and ceremony, and particularly for President Joe Biden, consider this one a soft launch as he tries to frame his bid for 2024 as re-election, and really we're looking for what kind of language he uses, how he tries to frame his accomplishments and how he's going to tout what he's achieved in his first 2 years, and how he plans to look ahead, working with this Republican House with a slim majority in the final 2 years of his presidency before we look ahead to 2024. So there's a lot to look for. I don't expect any big policy announcements, but there's going to be a lot of symbolism and a lot of parsing of words from the president. He has a lot to be proud of from a legislative standpoint, $1 trillion infrastructure plan, a CHIPS package. He's managed to usher through a climate change plan. Unemployment is at record lows. But on the other hand, you have polls suggesting the American public is really pessimistic about the direction and future of the party. The president's economic handling of the economy is underwater. He's losing support from his own Democratic base. So he has an uphill battle to convince Americans that he deserves a second term in the Oval Office. So that's really setting the table here, setting the stage for what we can expect tonight from President Biden as he not only faces a divided country, but for the first time in his administration, he faces a divided Congress. Instead of his good friend Nancy Pelosi, who will be sitting behind him, it's going to be the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, a Republican who holds a slim majority. So Biden has to work together with Republicans if he has any chance to pass other legislation as he looks ahead to 2024.
And Richard, it's interesting, of course, so much. I mean, it seems like they're in a constant election cycle south of the border, right? So we know, of course, the 2024 election cycle. I suppose we're already in it, and we're going to hear Biden alluding to some things. But you talked about those polls. There was a poll suggesting that even among Democrats, he's not necessarily the candidate that they want to see go into that next campaign. I'm wondering about any of the Democrats in either Congress or the Senate. Are any of them actually speaking out and saying, you know what, Mr. Biden, President Biden, one term's enough. You need to make way for someone else. Has anybody publicly said that yet?
There have been a few Democrats who are saying it quietly, but it's clear that Joe Biden is in charge of the party right now. A lot of the questions are on his vice president, Kamala Harris, who's facing criticism both within Democratic Party, and some former staffers are speaking out against her. Keep your eye out on other Democrats who are not on Capitol Hill. I'm thinking of California Governor Gavin Newsom, who's really sort of laying the groundwork out there to see if he's a contender for 2024, and other Democrats and in governors, I'm thinking California and, of course, Illinois, Jay Pritzker. But no one's really speaking loudly saying that it's time for Joe Biden to move on. The only indication we're getting are, of course, from a whole slew of opinion polls from the Washington Post, ABC, NBC, all kind of pointing the same thing, that Democrats aren't really keen on Joe Biden running for a second term. But, Republicans are also facing some challenges as well on leadership. So it's going to be a very interesting time as we look ahead to 2024. But that's 2 years from now. Today, it's the State of the Union where President Biden wants to frame his achievements, tout his accomplishments, give some tough talk on China in spite of that balloon that flew over the United States over the weekend, shot down in South Carolina. Expect some tough talk there. If you're a Canadian policymaker, you're going to be listening to any language that appears to soften this protectionist agenda that Biden really ran on in 2020. Will he be softening those terms? Is that a green light for Canada to start working with more cooperative trade with the United States? Will he say anything about his upcoming visit to Canada sometime next month? These are all things Canadian policymakers are going to be looking for. But ultimately, this is very much for a domestic audience tonight, with President Joe Biden really doing this soft launch to kick off his 2024 election bid.
Yeah, and Richard, you talk so much about the optics of all this. There's always sort of guests that are sitting, in the crowd watching on, highlighting certain things that the Bidens want to, highlight. What do you know, or who have you heard about in particular about special guests tonight, or people the president's going to be singling out, as it were?
Yeah. Well, from the Democratic side, there are guests who are supportive of pro-choice, of people who've had to travel from one state that's banned abortion to states that do allow late-term abortions. We have celebrities. We have the First Lady bringing Bono, who of course is a big proponent to fight climate change and boosting money for foreign aid. So perhaps that fits into the theme of delivering more resources to Ukraine, where Republicans are really pushing back on the amount of money that the United States sends to help Ukraine fight its war against Russia. You're also hearing on the Republican side Border Patrol officers who are very concerned about the deteriorating situation along the U.S. southern border. Republicans, of course, they want to impeach the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas, for his handling of the migrant crisis along the southern border. So each party brings somebody that fits their narrative as to what their key pet issue is. So we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see a lot of pomp and ceremony. But from a big grand policy perspective, don't expect anything huge tonight. Think of this as like a throne speech on Parliament Hill. Lots of pomp and ceremony, lots of lofty words, big flowery language. But at the end of the day, there's a message that the government of the day is trying to get across. From this perspective, it's going to be President Joe Biden really framing his candidacy for 2024 and touting his achievements, minimizing his failures, and really trying to present himself as the best choice, not only for Americans, but his own party to be the standard bearer heading into 2024.
All right, thanks for teeing that up for us tonight. That is CTV's Richard Madden on Capitol Hill in Washington. Appreciate the time.